The United States and China have announced that they've reached a basic consensus on a potential trade deal just days before US President Donald Trump is all set to meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. In fact, going into these talks, Xi Jinping feels he has the upper hand in the negotiations with Trump, but it's America's reputation too that is going to be under intense scrutiny. So what will be the outcome of this meeting? And if there is a grand trade deal announced between China and America, what does that mean for India? I dig a little deeper. When Air Force One landed in Malaysia on Sunday, US President Donald Trump began a tour that will bring him face to face with China's top leader, Xi Jinping. It comes at a time when the Asia-Pacific region has been increasingly reshaped by the competition between Beijing and Washington. In this new kind of superpower rivalry, Trump and Xi are offering contrasting visions for how the world should be ordered. And that has a great many consequences for chip factories in South Korea, car assembly lines in Vietnam, and the contested waters of the South China Sea. But most importantly, it will completely alter the status of the self-governed island of Taiwan. Now, unlike in the Cold War, the battlegrounds for power and influence are centered not just around troops or warships, but also on supply chains and on data centers. Governments across Asia are being increasingly pressurized to pick a side between America and China. Countries that are caught in the middle, whether it's Thailand or Singapore, or Malaysia, Indonesia, even India, must weigh how to benefit from this competition without being held hostage.
I have a good relationship with, as you know, President Xi. Very good. We're going to be meeting. We'll have a good meeting. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a great meeting, maybe a great meeting. But I think we're going to do some good business.
Countries in Asia do not want this to be a binary trade-off, an us versus them kind of strategic binary which George W. Bush had forced much of the world into 20 years ago. But the world today is a very different place. China is no longer just a rising power. It thinks, and not without reason, it is on par with America. America, long considered a retreating power, still has some aces up its sleeve, but Trump doesn't want to use any of that just yet. He just wants to cut a deal with Xi Jinping and leave the rest of Asia to fend for themselves. That is the opposite of what countries in Asia have experienced in the last 20 years. They were happy to have Washington and Beijing both woo them so that they could play one off the other. That might have been easier in the past when the United States was more engaged with Asia. When an American president visited, it would often be a way of reassuring America's allies and friends in the region that Washington had their backs, particularly against the hegemonic behavior of China. But Trump now wants none of that.
Message to the nations of Southeast Asia is that the United States is with you 100%, and we intend to be a strong partner and friend for many generations to come. 1 year ago, we were in a different position, but now we're in the best position we've ever been. And I really do. I say it's the golden age of America, golden age of the United States. Together we'll create incredible prosperity for the nations on both sides of the Pacific Ocean and to seize new opportunities for all of our people.
But as Trump touched down in Malaysia, America's commitments to its friends and partners in the region remain an open question. It's strained by resentment, whether it's on tariffs or even the uncertainty of future American troop deployments in Asia. Trump will also visit Japan on Monday and Tuesday. He will meet the new Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who is the first woman Prime Minister of Japan. And later in the week, he will travel to South Korea, where for the first time in his second term, Trump will meet with Xi Jinping of China. Beijing has sought to take advantage of the uncertainty in Asia by offering its own trade deals and investments to all its neighbors. At the same time, it is also staking a wider claim to the contested waters of the South and East China Seas. China's contention is it is the only superpower in the region, in fact in the world, to be able to confront the Trump administration. It has warned the Asian continent of consequences if they choose to join Washington in restricting trade with China. But it's going to be difficult for Asian governments, even US allies like South Korea and Japan, not to feel like bystanders when Trump and Xi meet on the sidelines of the APEC summit in South Korea. The global economy hangs in the balance as the two leaders of the two biggest economies hold talks which could either end this round of trade war or it could begin the next round of trade war. Trump wants Xi Jinping to roll back on China's new export controls on rare earths. He also wants China to restart purchase of American soybeans and also do more to crack down on Chinese-made fentanyl, which is finding its way into America. Most importantly, Trump wants to come away looking like he's scored a deal with Xi Jinping. That would bolster his image as a strongman deal maker. On the other side is Xi Jinping, who wants Trump to drop his tariffs on Chinese goods. He wants greater access to American technology, whether it's semiconductors, or loosen restrictions on Chinese investments into the United States. But the icing on the cake would be if Trump were to signal that he's open to reducing Washington's support for Taiwan. America so far has maintained strategic ambiguity on the question of Taiwan. Trump may altogether drop support for Taiwan.
You are there meeting with your Chinese counterparts ahead of President Trump's planned meeting with President Xi of China. Mr. Secretary, do you believe that China is ready to make a trade deal?
Kristen, I can tell you they are, because we just finished 2 days of negotiations, and we've created a framework for the two leaders to discuss on Thursday in Korea.
Xi Jinping is likely going into these talks with Trump feeling that China has the upper hand. New export rules on rare earths have given him powerful leverage. America is still years away from finding suitable alternatives, even though Trump did sign a few deals with Thailand and Cambodia this week. He also unveiled a $3 billion rare earth deal with Australia last week, but none of that is going to deter China, which has a stranglehold on rare earth processing in the world. It has weaponized rare earths in its trade war with America. Markets went into a tailspin, and Trump announced retaliatory tariffs up to 100% starting November 1. But now, both sides seem to want to pull back. The trade war with America has illustrated that China will weaponize trade, and that too at the drop of a hat if it serves its own interest. And if they can do this with Washington, the biggest economy in the world, then they wouldn't think twice before throwing Malaysia or Singapore or Vietnam under the bus. So the message from the Trump-Xi meeting is going to be this: has the number 2 power in the world now arrived on the high table, and is the number 1 power in the world willing to retreat and accommodate the number 2 player? All right, so if there's going to be a US-China deal, as is being expected when Trump and Xi Jinping meet later this week, what does that mean for the global economy? What does it mean particularly for India? Because India still hasn't clinched its own trade deal with America. And also Prime Minister Modi deciding not to go to ASEAN, instead addressing it virtually. Let's talk about both of these to Dr. Brahmachalani, strategic affairs expert. Thank you very much, Dr. Brahmachalani, for joining us. So first things first, let's deal with the US-China situation. Trump is very hopeful that there will be a deal. I think his Treasury Secretary has said there's pretty much a framework now for when Trump and Xi Jinping meet later this week. If they clinch that deal, if there is going to be a US-China deal announced later this week, what does it mean for the global economy, and what does it mean particularly for India?
For the global economy, at least for the global stock markets, such a deal would be very welcome, because these tensions between the US and China, in fact, there's an ongoing trade war between the two, has roiled the world markets. So a trade deal of whatever kind that emerges from the negotiations will calm the markets. But we should not forget that Trump blows hot and cold on China. One day he's quoting China, other day he's really talking about China being a major threat to the US. So we have seen this pattern. And even if a trade deal were to emerge from the Xi Jinping-Trump meeting, Trump's intrinsic hostility toward China will not evaporate. So we will see a pattern in the months and the rest of the term of Trump, where he seeks to both quote China as well as contain China.
But what does it mean for India if Xi Jinping and Trump were to announce this big deal, and the tariffs on Chinese goods would come down to 20% or 30%, whatever it is that they arrive at? What does it mean for India? Because India has not clinched its own trade deal with America just yet.
Well, there are two things here. First, that even when nations clinch trade deals with Washington, it does not result in a significant lowering of tariffs. In fact, as this week has shown, this last weekend, that even when countries like Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia clinched trade deals with Washington, their 19% tariffs did not come down even by 1% point. So a trade deal by itself doesn't mean much. We have seen how Japan is having second thoughts about its trade deal with Washington. So it's in a way good that India is taking its own time to stretch the negotiations and reach a trade deal that would not be lopsided as Trump wants. Trump wants a trade deal with India on his terms. So the longer it takes for India to reach a trade deal, the better it will be. I'm more concerned about the differential negotiating strategy of India, that India is negotiating under duress, with Washington having weaponized tariffs and secondary sanctions against India. Normally, when you go to any negotiations, you should be building counter leverage. But New Delhi has sought not to build any counter leverage. It has tried to be the nice boy in the negotiations with Washington.
And finally, the Prime Minister, deciding not to go to ASEAN, instead address it virtually. What do you make of that?
Well, that raises the question as to how many international meetings Modi will miss so as to keep a distance from the mercurial Trump. Modi did not go to the UN General Assembly special session. He did not go to the ASEAN summit, even though with this ASEAN summit, there is this India-ASEAN summit every year.
Yeah.
So Modi skipped both the ASEAN summit and the India-ASEAN summit, which wasn't really good because, after all, we should not forget that some time back, India had actually hosted all the ASEAN leaders at its Republic Day.
Correct.
Underscoring how India values the relationship with ASEAN. India has a free trade agreement with ASEAN and considers itself to be closely aligned with ASEAN on many issues. And therefore, for Prime Minister Modi to skip the ASEAN summit, largely because he wanted to keep distance from Trump, while in one way it was good because you know how Trump is, quite temperamental and his loose tongue. So avoiding him may have been a good idea, yet at the same time, skipping the meeting didn't send a good diplomatic message to ASEAN.
All right, Dr. Brahmacharani, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. A pleasure, as always, speaking with you, sir. Thank you.